All right. This is going to be I think this is going to be my favorite episode of all time. I really think so. There are so many things coming together at once. I know we don't have the biggest audience right now in the world, but I think we are actually on the cusp of some massive, massive discoveries and hope for this world. Hi, my name is Anthony Parent, and I am the founder of IRSMedic. And with me today are two of my favorite guests of all time, Keith Redmond and John Richardson. And for the past years, we have been examining this idea of U.S. citizenship and how taxation is impacted. And really in the news right now is this. Let me just get the screen share of what we're going to talk about. What precipitated today's podcast. It's really something else. Here it is right here. This is what it is. This is a memorandum from the U.S. Department of Justice Civil Division to all Civil Division employees saying, hey, President Trump and Attorney General Bondi have directed the Civil Division to use its enforcement authorities to advance the administration's policy objective. This memorandum describes these policy objectives. And if we go down here, we're going to see that they're looking to, ending anti-Semitism, whatever that is. Okay, we got to make sure we have that. Okay. Protecting women and children, ending sanctuary jurisdiction, prioritizing denaturalization, right there. So about getting rid of people who have U.S. citizenship. That's what it's about. So this is really the interesting thing. And here was an article that made it into Bloomberg, adding a little context to that. Falsifying a tax return can cost you your U.S. citizenship under Trump. And by the way, we're going to be separating fact and fiction because there's a lot of fear going on there.
And Anthony, this is only people who are naturalized as U.S. citizens.
That is as it appears now. But this is what I would say, Keith, is that there's so many other things going on.
Yeah.
That every U.S. citizen, everybody should be watching this because there are so many things going on with this. We need to pay attention to what the federal government is actually doing and how utterly depraved it is, how bad it is. It's incredible how bad it is. It's really mind blowing. I'm still in shock from my research this morning. So that's what we have. And I'm going to introduce my guest in a second here. And here's a tweet that John had. Basically, this is what we're going to start off. So I want to start off, and I'm going to go with Keith. Keith, you are here as welcome, Keith. Thanks for joining us today. And Keith, you are here as our resident layperson. You are the global navigator for Americans overseas. And while this issue isn't necessarily affecting U.S. expats directly, citizenship-based taxation is a huge thing, and that's actually what we're trying to end because it comes with so many abuses.
Yeah.
Are you ready for this, Keith? What are you ready for this?
Hit me.
All right. Well, no, I'm just saying. And this is what I want to hear. I want to hear. You're really here to answer the questions so that John and I, as the attorneys, who we tend to go off the deep end, keep it real, Keith. So, as we're going through, I want to thank you and your audience for here. Keith has been instrumental in getting this up, and I'm really excited about it. And also the great John Richardson. John has some slides that we'll get into right now. John has been at the forefront of providing a lot of the intellectual backbone for a lot of the efforts to repeal. And I think where we are today, wow, it's going to be something. So let's get into John's slides right now. Okay, we're going to add to the stage here. And nope, that's not the one here. Where are your slides? Here are your slides. Oh, jumped ahead a little bit. So good morning, John. All right, you got your McDonald's coffee? There it is. All right. Let's go. 32 ounces. Let's go. Fire it up.
All right. Before we go through the slides.
Yeah.
I think that lawyers are a big part of the problem.
Oh God, yes.
Because they tend to.
That's so funny coming from two lawyers, gentlemen.
It's so bad. That. No, and that's exactly what I said this morning. I'm like, we are so bad. Yeah, go ahead, John.
Yeah. Well. The reason is largely that, and I've certainly, in fact, I begin this way because this is exactly what I've done in this presentation, okay, to make a narrow point. But I want to begin with why, although the point is correct, I think it's a diversion, okay? So what lawyers tend to do is they, parse statutes and read cases and, find a way to distinguish one case from another. And we're going to have no problem demonstrating that these articles claiming that somebody can be denaturalized for a tax mistake are ridiculous, okay? And that's what the short presentation is largely designed to show. It's sort of a, if you recognize yourself as a naturalized citizen and think you might have made a mistake on a previous tax return, let it go. Okay, that is not what's going on. But the thing is that, there are two things that the U.S. government has historically weaponized. Okay, one is citizenship and the other is taxation. Okay, there's no question about it. Citizenship stripping and all kinds of things in the tax code. And what's interesting is that by using tax-related issues, okay, and they have to be major, okay, I think bordering on fraud, which we'll get to in a minute, to strip people of their citizenship, right? What's happening is that this is a demonstration of the general vindictiveness of the government. I mean, it's hard to imagine anything worse than this, actually. But they're sort of natural, they're reflexive action to attack people in terms of citizenship and taxation. And if you could for a minute go back to the Justice Department memo.
Yep.
And go to the bottom of it.
Yep. Okay. Second there. Okay, and this is the
so just move up a little bit, right? So they say, well, they're going to prioritize denaturalization. Now, one point I want to make here is that they don't mention tax in there at all. Okay, the closest you get is financial crimes against the United States. So I think it's worth making the point that tax is not listed in there, but go down a little bit further, okay? Look at 10. And let's read this slowly. All other cases refer to the civil division that the division determines to be sufficiently important to pursue. So in other words, what they're actually doing is sort of saying, you know what, if we think there's some issue here that we in and of ourselves think is important, then we may begin these denaturalization proceedings, right? Now, we'll get into the law on this in a second, but I want to make an additional point that I think matters here, all right? And it's the 14th Amendment, which very, very specifically says that somebody born in the United States or naturalized is a U.S. citizen, all right? And we have the Ephorium case, which they weren't talking about naturalized citizens, or actually maybe they were. Yeah, no, I think Ephorium was a naturalized citizen, come to think of it, okay? But it wasn't, but they weren't really making the distinction between naturalized citizens, born citizens, I think specifically in that case, but they did recognize the constitutional right to citizenship for naturalized citizens, and that's important. And it would seem to me that ought to put a constitutional restraint on this. Any other cases referred to the civil division. Okay, I think that there is some constitutional protection there. But that said, the real problem here is, and people can agree or disagree on this, okay? But it is clear that part of what the current government is doing is trying to get rid of people they don't like, okay, through, deportation if they're not citizens. And now we have, this denaturalization.
I'm going to say it's not necessarily that, though. I mean, I think that's what it seems like. And I think this is where we have to be careful because again, we're going to talk about, look, we're not trying to scare people into things, but really what they're doing with this, it's the fear and intimidation. The IRS doesn't have to do a lot to get a reaction in the marketplace, to get a reaction. And I think that's a point.
Yeah, well, it's not the IRS here. But what's really going on here, okay, is, in plain view, although people don't see this, sort of a fight between a government that doesn't believe that the Constitution and constitutional rights matter.
That's right.
And, and then on the other hand, a subset of people who passionately do believe they matter, and the vast majority who are too stupid to see what's going on.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. So, and I think the legal profession has a very important role to play here. I don't want to, get into this in a big way, but I do not believe, or let me put it another way, I do believe that a large part of the success of the Third Reich, all right, was because the lawyers sort of saying, well, our job is to interpret the law, basically interpreted the law and went along with the law, right?
Yeah, that's propaganda. That was Nuremberg propaganda. I don't know.
I'm not so sure that
I am pretty
but
sure.
here's my point, Anthony.
Yeah, go ahead.
Here's my point. Lawyers matter, okay? And
I
when
agree.
you have, a legal profession that thinks that their job is more to determine, whether the government has a legal right to denaturalize somebody than, looking at this in a broader way, I think you got a problem. Okay.
I'm going to agree with you, John. I think the legal profession is a massive, massive problem and potentially the biggest problem that we have. And I think towards the end of this, we're going to see exactly why. What I want to show, it is so bad, and that attorneys are standing there with a straight face. That's what's funny. Attorneys have a straight face during all this complete absurdity, and it's going to be blown away. I think in this episode about how utterly absurd the legal system is in the United States, and really how utterly absurd all legal education is too. It is so bad, and we're going to get to that. So, John, I want to get
all
to
right. So here we go. Let's run through this. So, it always proceeds according to law. Okay. It always proceeds according to law. And here we have section 14.
Well, let's confuse. I'm just gonna play Andrew Prune. It proceeds according to statute.
Well, in this case, the law is reflected in the statute. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So here's the basis, or the claimed legal basis, to do this. And this is a very old statute. Basically, this provides the basis for stripping people of citizenship, naturalized citizens. And, there's two basic grounds, right? It's illegally procured, whatever that means, or there's some kind of misrepresentation or non-representation. So that's, there's really not much there, but let's continue on through this. Okay. That's how you have to parse the language. Illegally procured by concealment, that's omission, or a willful misrepresentation, commission. Now, there's not a lot on this. If anybody's interested, there are two very, very interesting analyses of what's actually going on here, but continuing on. This has reached Supreme Court from time to time. The most recent decision is a 1988 Justice Scalia decision, which I didn't read it in its totality, but at a very minimum, what it says is that it's not just any kind of misrepresentation, all right, that would be grounds for stripping somebody of their citizenship, right? So
so I just want to back off here, and this is great. Thank you very much, John, because here's the current law. So I just want people to pay attention to something here. Okay, so here's the standard. The test of whether concealment or misrepresentations are material is whether they can be shown by clear, unequivocal, and convincing evidence to have been predictably capable of affecting. Which doesn't even make sense to me. What is that?
Well, all he's saying, okay, or what the court is, I think, to read this narrowly, okay, what it means is that not every misrepresentation is grounds for denaturalizing somebody. It clearly says that, okay?
But it doesn't really say much other than that.
I don't think it does say much more than that. I mean, one would have to read the decision. And
I would just say this. I think the important thing here, though, is that you have the clear, convincing standard, right?
Yep.
And you and I could all agree that's not proof beyond a reasonable doubt, right?
It is not proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And I note also that this comes from the Civil Division of the Department of Justice.
Okay. It's
right?
an interesting standard. Interesting
It's a
standard.
lower standard. It's a
Yeah,
lower,
you know basically a little bit above a negligence standard, below a reasonable doubt. So it's a lower standard. The government just sort of defined by statute, and then the Supreme Court said, "Okay, that's fine. Hey, you could define any standard of proof by statute." Sure, the Supreme Court says, right?
in this particular case, I believe that the court ruled they could not strip him of his citizenship. I think that's what happened. Okay, but I don't actually recall
Yeah,
the result in it.
but they're
that's
definitely
the,
saying the standard of proof is clear, convincing standard.
well, yeah, there's that. I mean, that's sort of a technical, how do you go about it? But I think that there's been a lot of panic about, oh my God, some kind of a tax, mistake can get me denaturalized. The point is, that is not the case. It is not every kind of mistake, every kind of misrepresentation. It has to meet a certain standard. And there's no doubt in my mind that, first of all, is it possible to have a tax return that doesn't have something in it, okay, that could be construed to be, well, this isn't right? Very difficult.
Again, we do a lot of tax returns, and I find, there's various ways to do different things. And, you could have a debate, like, oh, we do it this way because of this, and we do it this way because of this. And so I would say this, that you could find things wrong in a return that aren't really wrong.
Yeah, okay, but I mean, mistakes are commonplace.
Oh God, yes. No, it's impossible. It's impossible to make
that's
a
the
perfect
key
return.
point, right?
Right.
Okay, so
Right.
moving on. All right. Now, we've already talked about the next
Yep.
couple of slides. This is the June 11th thing. And it's very interesting how they bury something like denaturalization, as though it's a little consequence, But anyway, next.
Oh God.
Okay,
so
next.
bad.
We've already looked
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
that. All right. My friend,
All right. You talked with Virginia on this, right?
Yeah,
So,
I did a podcast with her on this yesterday.
Yeah.
This is a very, very good article that you can find at Forbes. The point that she's making, which is, I think, I'm sure is the correct point, that the way this is being spun is, oh my God, he can be naturalized for some kind of a tax mistake, is clearly wrong. Now, I took that short excerpt out of the article, and I bolded tax fraud, knowing underreporting of income, that part of it. Now, that's very different from, mistakes on a tax return. That's a whole different thing. So the way to, I think, understand this is not that, they're going to be, they want to denaturalize people because of tax mistakes, but there are circumstances under which filing of tax returns or the quality of the information in the returns might rise to such an egregious level, okay, that it could trigger the levers of naturalization. Although I have my personal doubts that that's appropriate, but that's the point that she's making. Okay, she wrote the article to say, stop paying attention to all this junk out there that's that's doing this, fanning the flames of fear. This is a very, very small, select group of people. In this particular case, I believe the woman was a tax preparer, okay, among other things. But the point is, there's a huge difference between fraud, knowing underreporting of income, and the kinds of mistakes that are on, most people.
No. I'm going to disagree every which way, because the IRS makes up stuff all the time. The mistakes they make all the time, so that the idea that there's only certain people who need to worry about this. No, everyone does, because the IRS works completely arbitrary and outside the law. So
that would be true, Anthony.
So I think, really the purpose of what's going on here seems to be just, hey, look, let's rattle some cages. And then, unfortunately, what happens, though, this is what happens, because, I mean, you are right, and you or Virginia are completely right, is that the tax industry does take these things, blows them up out of proportion, and then, oh my God, what they will do to people is worse oftentimes than the IRS. And so I think the point is to keep your head on your shoulders, and don't necessarily trust someone who says that you're going to lose everything. You want to look at everything as a case by case basis. So that's what I would say is like, we do live in I think it's not really a legal system that we're in. It's just a lottery. You could get selected for torture. Any of us can at any point. That's really the problem that we have with this government. It can make any decision it wants, and it can apply any standard it wants. It can provide any whatever court hearing it wants, whether it's supervised by a court or not, do anything it wants. I think that's really the problem that we have. And so in this landscape, when people are freaking out, well, they are freaking out with good reason. The thing is that correct? You do have to watch out, because there's a lot of vultures out there that will lead you down the wrong road. And Keith, that's something that you're encountering all the time. I mean, you know the vultures, and you know which ones they are.
Absolutely, the scaremongering.
Yeah, and so I mean, you could kind of see them, right? They're looking at this like, oh my God, this is going to be so juicy here, right? You could see them getting interested in that, right?
Well,
Yeah.
look, the vast majority of the people in the tax compliance world, they don't read statutes, they don't read regulations, they don't read case law. They just use computer programs, etc. I mean,
right.
Again, let's be very, very narrow here. Okay, most mistakes, regardless of whether the IRS goes after anybody or not, we're talking about this in the context of a denaturalization.
All right. Well, here, let's put it. I want to give it an actual. Okay, let's say. How about this? Let's give it a real meaningful example of someone making a mistake or doing fraud. How about someone leaving off a bank account on an FBAR? Okay, let's suppose that
intentionally or
and
accidentally.
someone. Let's say that they left it off, and we don't know.
Okay.
We don't know why.
I don't think so. No. I don't.
Okay, you don't think the government could pump that up into grounds for denaturalization?
No, I don't.
You don't think? Okay. I mean, okay.
I mean, they've got to prove. My reading of this, okay, is that this reaches the standard of egregiousness where theoretically it could trigger the denaturalization thing. I think they've got to prove actual willful intent.
All right. Now, same question I have, John, but the government doesn't like you. Can the government do it?
Well, the government can do anything it wants.
There you go.
The question is, we know that. The
Yeah.
question is, what is the kind of conduct and what are the group of people, if any, okay, who, would have reason to worry about this? Now, I would say this, okay, and, this is sort of, so we don't have to, cover this again on the slides. I would say this, right? If somebody goes to a lawyer and says, well, I'm worried about this, that, or the other thing, I do think it's reached the point, and I think that June 11th memorandum really should mean that every lawyer should ask, one, are you a U.S. citizen? And two, how did you get that citizenship? Okay, because if they're a naturalized citizen, I mean, this is interesting. They're obviously expanding this or attempting to expand it, way beyond the way this has been used in the past. Okay. In the past, this has been, at least the cases I'm aware of have been, to denaturalize people who it turns out were, guilty of war crimes or, something like this, right? But now they seem to be expanding it into other things, okay? Things that happened after somebody, got to the United States. The other thing that's interesting about this particular case is, and this is just information in the public domain, obviously, so I presume the correctness, but I don't know for sure, is that the conduct complained about here, the tax conduct complained about, although it took place before she was naturalized, she wasn't charged until after she was naturalized, right? So, that's an interesting dynamic as well. But the key point here, I think, is I think that people should be concerned about the broader problem here, okay, of the government, deciding to weaponize citizenship. Which
well, I mean, in our court systems are, because as I'm looking at this, as I'm looking at your text here that you have here, even uncharged offenses such as tax fraud or knowing underreporting income must be disclosed during naturalization. These are, even uncharged offenses. Like, well, you mean maybe there wasn't an offense? I mean, that's really a weird thing. How does?
Yeah, I mean, do I think I've committed a crime? I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, this is part of the problem, and the longer I mean, U.S. citizenship is getting to be a pretty risky thing. Okay.
Oh, right. And because it doesn't, I mean, and we'll get into it. I think, and I've never quite understood, we know really a focus of this podcast has been citizenship-based taxation and why it's so dangerous. Today, citizenship is so dangerous, as we'll explain today what
I think that
what the government did to devalue our citizenship is breathtaking. We'll go in and it's going to be amazing. Next slide.
So anyway, point
All right.
made on that. And here I say the same thing 4 times. For people who, if anybody, there are people who out there, really worried about it. You should not worry about it for 2 reasons. One, you don't have anything to worry about, I think. But secondly, how would you worry about it anyway? The last thing you're going to do is, go down the street to some, lawyers looking for work.
Well, and I would say this is that, the law is certainly interested in punishing the person, right? That's what it's looking to do. And that, this is a political decision to say, this is what's sort of troubling is that the Trump administration is using citizenship as a way to say, hey, as a red meat for its base, right? Like, hey, we got rid of these bad guys that we don't like. Who knows anything about them, right? Who knows anything of the truth? But the administration is going to say that they're bad. Okay, there, we got rid of them. And like, ha, America first. We got rid of our due process. Isn't that great? I mean, that's kind of what we have here. And that's kind of what's really disgusting as you're seeing people support, the cultism. They're supporting their own citizenship being destroyed because their team won the election. And it's just, it's disgusting.
So one of the, I think a way to put this, okay, and this seems to be either not realized, not understood, or nobody has any interest in this. If you want to live in a, sort of relatively free, democratic, liberal democracy, and a lot of people don't, but if you do, okay, the price you pay for that is that there are people out there who you're not going to like or whose views you're not going to agree with, okay? And that's probably preferable, okay, to living under a system where, the government decides right and wrong. And if you're on the wrong side of it, you're out. But in any case, next.
Well, I think that's where we are right now. That is what we have.
Well, I think that's a reasonable conclusion. Okay.
Yeah. All right, let's go. All right, we'll go next slide here.
Okay. Now, my point here is that, again, when we talk about taxation, taxation is very much part of American culture. It's part of what it means to an American. What does it mean to be an American? Taxation, taxes, forms, and penalties. That's what it means primarily. And we see this, okay, reflected in interesting ways. I mean, we have the Reed Amendment, you renounce for tax reasons, we can't come back in. In 2011, with the OVDI thing, I mean, you may recall there were all these green card holders.
We had a lot of green card holders as clients.
They didn't know about the FBAR, and was this a violation? You could get them deported, this sort of stuff, right? And here we have, it's interesting that the administration, this attempt to denaturalize this Vanessa Ben is once again, okay, now think of it, right? Is once again to try to link taxation and tax compliance with what it means to be a good American, right?
Mm.
So no question about it. What's an American? Taxation.
Taxation, it comes with it.
Absolutely.
It really comes with it. And I think that, John, this is what I was saying before. It's just a restatement of your of one of your theorems. The U.S. government has threats of certain penalties for uncertain conduct.
Absolutely.
And I think that's really the thing is like, can you guarantee you will never be penalized for something you didn't do? And the answer is no, because the government can do anything it wants against you. And there's many reasons why. And really, it's I think the abolition of constitutional law. A constitutional law has been long discarded. I'm going to explain that a little bit more.
Well, it's this idea that there should be no limitation on what governments can do.
And I think it's like we have to stop this nonsense that we live in a free country. America is one of the least free countries around. It's one of the most passively aggressive, manipulative, deceitful, lying entities ever in existence. It is truly, when you see what's happening, it does appear to be an open, violent insurrection against the rule of law. That's what the U.S. federal government most certainly appears to be. I'll let everyone reach their conclusion as we get into this, but this is kind of, maybe this is where, because I know we're near the, okay, here we go. Oh, right. Then we want to get to this one.
Oh yeah, the exit tax.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
this is it's kind of it's a side issue unless it affects you. But I mean, why didn't the government just go find a bunch of wealthy naturalized citizens, denaturalize them, and confiscate their assets through the exit tax?
And I think that's really
Oh.
honestly my fear is they can point to someone, oh, here's the person we don't like. Okay, throw everyone else in. And meanwhile, MAGA is cheering at their own enslavement because they're too stupid to know how the law is working. No offense. I did vote for Donald Trump, but that was because he did make a promise to end double taxation for Americans abroad, a promise he missed out on.
The problem is that people tend not to oppose things that, they feel align with their political views or benefit them personally. But, you got to understand that this expansion of, and this is a clearly stated intent to expand denaturalization. Okay. I mean, this isn't theoretical. They said it right there.
Right.
I mean, and that is not just an assault on the undesirables of the world. That's an assault on everybody, right? Because it is an attempt to, tear down, the constitutional protective barriers. And so I want to ask you a very simple question. I want a yes and a no or a no from both of you. Okay. Anthony, do you believe there ought to be limitations on what the government can do? Yes. Or no?
Yes.
Keith, do you believe there ought to be limitations on what the government can do?
Absolutely.
All right. Now, the current government, do you believe the current government believes there should be limitations on what the government can do?
No.
No.
Yeah. And this is, this is a train wreck waiting to happen. Because, all of this, oh my God, we picked up some, horrible person and, we've got them in some detention center or this. I mean, you got to understand that this is an assault. Of course, it's an assault on everybody's protection from the government. It's just that we're seeing it played out in relation to a person who might not be popular. Okay.
Well, John, you're reminding me of something. This was Michael Crichton, the author. Michael Crichton wrote a short article, and it was something about the Murray Gell-Mann and amnesia effect. It was just a short little article he wrote that's been cited around, and it went something like this. He said, hey, have you ever noticed that you might be an expert in a particular area? You pick up a newspaper. This is written back when newspapers were a thing. You read something in the newspaper, and the author and the reporter kind of has it backwards. He basically says something that wet roads make it rain, basically completely inverting the whole thing, not getting it right, completely misexplaining it. You read that article, and then he goes, then you turn the page, you read another article. Now, it's not anything you have special area of, but you have amnesia that this publication just got something totally wrong, and now it has a new thing, and you have amnesia that, wait a second, this reporter, this publication isn't accurate, and you know that, but you forget about it. And likewise, everyone knows how bad this government, everybody can point to something like, oh yeah, this government's really bad. What they did in Waco, what they did in 9/11, what they do, everyone knows of things this government has done as bad. Assassination of MLK, JFK. You don't have to go that far. Regardless of your political stripe, you can point to something like, oh yeah, you know what, this government evil, what it did there. And then all of a sudden we have amnesia. Hey, our guy won. Wow, look at this. We have amnesia about everything awful that the federal government has done and never apologizes for. We don't need to go back to the Civil War to find this. We could go back to more recent history. The government intentionally put poison in the alcohol supply during Prohibition, killing 10,000 people, injuring 100,000 people. Not one person was ever punished. Not one person was ever punished for murdering people. That is the federal government. That is what we are. We shouldn't have amnesia. We should not have amnesia about this federal government. Like, wait, aren't you the guys who murdered people? And didn't, you don't care? That's who we're dealing with. Why do we give credibility to the thing? And I think that's one of my biggest frustration is we all have amnesia about the government's most grotesque abuse. And that we think if we forget about it, somehow that's going to make things better.
Well, but why? The reason this happens. I mean, I agree with you, Anthony, but the reason this happens is because all of this proceeds according to law. Laws the people can't understand. They can't read this stuff. It becomes impossible. So all this stuff is going on, and it's as though the way the process of lawmaking works is to essentially obscure from citizens, from the general public, unless they have highly developed technical skills, right? The ability to understand what's going on. Yeah. And we see this everywhere, right? We see this, we talk about tax mostly. We see this particularly in tax, but, this goes on everywhere, immigration, et cetera. So, I think that a way to restore this would be to focus on the legislative process. The first thing is you get rid of omnibus bills, okay, so that every law, is standalone. Secondly, okay, any amendments to laws have to include a clear statement of what the law would look like after the amendment. If you were to do those two things, I think that might be a help. But in any case, clearly we're dealing with something that is completely out of control, and most people don't care. So we have a government that doesn't care and doesn't care that it doesn't care, and we have a majority of the population that doesn't care and doesn't care that it doesn't care. So, where does that go?
All right. Well, I think thank you for that, because that's the perfect segue to what I have here. Because we have Keith Redmond here, and so I want to bring Keith Redmond is not a lawyer. So, Keith, I want you to follow along with what I'm going to say here, okay?
Okay.
So let's talk about what the U.S. Constitution is, okay? And I want to just explain a few things to how it was passed, why it was passed, why it was alleged to pass. And yes, and Rob, I do agree with you on the Articles of Confederation. The Articles of Confederation was a law of the land, and before the Constitution usurped it. And before I get a little bit further, Rob, I did used to think that, that was really the problem. The Constitution was really the problem. But consider this, Rob. Consider this. The common law constrained kings. So if the common law could constrain a king, why couldn't it constrain the federal government that was founded under the common law? And Keith, this is what I'm trying to get to you. Most people, and I think most people will say, oh, hey, what are your fundamental rights? And they'll go to the Bill of Rights. Well, there they are. There's my fundamental rights. And there could be nothing further from the truth. Because
most Americans, that's what they would say.
They would say that their rights are in the Bill of Rights, but that's not true. Because there is a lowercase constitutional right? And you know that, like in Great Britain, there's constitutional rights, but they don't have a written constitution, right?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So when the Constitution was passed, James Madison said, hey, look, we don't want a Bill of Rights. Oh, come on, we got to have a Bill of Rights. We got to control this Constitution. He goes, whoa. Where's the authority the government has to do the thing that you want it not to do? He goes, it doesn't matter. I'm like, look, if we start articulating rights in a Bill of Rights, what's going to happen is that people are going to point to that and say, that's exclusive of all rights. Oh, you're being silly, James Madison. All right, well, he goes, just put in a couple amendments to say this is not the exclusive listing of all rights. So they did. The 9th and 10th Amendments said, hey, look, this isn't all of it. Powers not vested to the government belong to the states or the people, respectively. Okay, so they did that anyway. But what has happened since then? Most people, like, if you're gonna, like, oh, hey, look, I'm for gun rights. You're gonna look at the text of the Second Amendment and nothing else. But
right.
that's completely wrong, because where rights come from are God. Where they have been articulated is with the common law. Our fundamental rights come from God. And this is the understanding of the country when it was passed, that our common law rights come from God and they're inalienable. You can't pass laws to undo it. You can't. Someone can't give them away. They're inalienable rights, and they all stem from the common law, which is developed to solve problems, to create an ordered system of liberty. That is what the common law does. And when people are denied justice, that is when they start looking for strongmen. That is when they start looking for strongmen. When the people are denied justice again and again because the common law is usurped, that's when they go to the strongman. Every time. They're like, this is nonsense. We're just going to go, and then you might get some problems with your strongman. But that's the point I want to understand, Keith, is that when we look to our fundamental constitutional rights that are inalienable, we don't look to the Bill of Rights, but rather we look to the common law. Make sense?
It makes sense, but most people, like you said at the beginning, will look to the Bill of Rights.
Right. And and I think what John was talking about
that's how
earlier,
we're taught. That's how we were taught in school.
Exactly. And in law school.
Well, I don't know about law school. I'm just
right,
talking about
there, but I can tell you in law school as well, it is so we are so conditioned to look at statutes and not question the legality of the statutes. We automatically assume every statute is great, and it's just going to be some cranks who who don't like the legislative process. We've been conditioned to believe that voting is giving us a solution when it never does. Every time we vote, we always lose. Doesn't matter who you vote for. You're not going to get what you want. So now this is what I've done. And
Anthony, do you believe that the Constitution is a living document, a living, breathing document, that as we move forward in life, if you will, things can be changed and adjusted?
So the answer to that, is most certainly not. Now, of course, people,
but it has.
the living Constitution argument is basically propaganda. That's something that is taught in law school as it's legitimate. And it's not legitimate in any way.
So how do you look at the amendments to the Constitution?
Well, I think that's a great question.
Also the amendments that what's the word I'm looking for? I'll just use the word because I can't think of it. Delete a previous amendment.
And I think and so what we're talking about here is, what are amendments? What's the Constitution? The Constitution is our statutes. Those are statutes. Statutes are not allowed to violate fundamental rights. But what we'll see, and I'm going to show this, is that there's nothing but violation of constitutional rights by our statutes. And that's what I have here. I put this up here. The 40 different ways the U.S. Code violates fundamental rights in violation of the U.S. Constitution, which took those common law rights and codified them. That's the thing. The U.S. Code violates the fundamental rights in violation of the U.S. Constitution, which adopted all fundamental rights of the common law. So as we go through this, we're going to go through let's just talk about, under the common law, how do you acquire citizenship? Well, where you're born there. Okay, well then you're automatically, and if your children are born elsewhere, they are also going to be citizens. So that's common law. That's sort of based in that kind of makes sense. Now the U.S. statutes have basically, totally, have changed that, and so that the statute there's conditions on naturalization and complexity, and it is limiting access. They restrict it, and I actually didn't know this. I didn't know that jus soli, I think I'm pronouncing that hopefully correct enough, was actually the law of the land. I didn't know that. I just learned that this morning. That is actually the law of the land. That is how much statutes have overwritten the common law. Attorneys don't know this. Attorneys don't know the common law part of this. We're not taught this. And then we talk about, well, what about loss of citizenship? What's that in the common law? Hey, look, man, that's got to be something really, really extreme, right? It's like treason, or you want to be out of the country, right? Yeah. But you know what? For fraud, legal procurement, or if you don't want to serve in the military, there's a whole bunch of things that statutes have come up and created this. This is here's another, this statute right here is violating the Constitution because it changes the common law definition of when you can renounce. They're changing this. These are statutes. Legislatures who don't read the law sign into, and then they're giving the full weight as if they're legitimate, right? And then we talk about, here we go. And your inalienable rights as a citizen. Again, Madison said, we don't want a Bill of Rights because it's impossible to list all the rights that we have. Here's just 40. Here's just 40. These were put into our Constitution. These are our constitutional rights. These are this. And it says it. Your rights of citizenship are inalienable. They can't be taken away. So that's your residence, protection from exiles, legal protections, freedom of movement tied to your allegiance, right? But when we get to your right of citizenship, like, okay, they can take away your passport, no problem. If you are a naturalized citizen, there's a different set of rules for you, right? Under the common law, there isn't. Under the statutes, there is. They're creating a phony segregation between naturalized and someone born in the U.S. That's against the common law. And again, here, passport revocation for unpaid taxes. This is not at all constitutional. Nothing allows this. But the code not only allows for someone's passport to be revoked for tax debts, there's no judicial supervision over it. The IRS just sends notices. Oh, we're going to take it away. There's no court hearing. There's no opportunity to be heard. There's no due process. It's amazing how bad this is. We keep going, and then as we keep going down, all these various maxims of law, we are just like, wait a second, this is crazy. This is crazy. So much of the law, so much of the common law is completely contradicted by statute. That is not at all allowed in completely under a constitutional system. So this is where I have some of these here. I won't go through every single one of them right now, but basically, hey, look, citizenship cannot be taken without consent or extreme cause. Right there it is. These are not there, right? You have here your vague criteria. Well, do you have good moral character? Whatever that means, right? This is completely arbitrary. We don't, and this is where I'm getting to. Do you see how trashed your U.S. citizenship is? It doesn't mean what it means. Your citizenship right now is defined by statute and defined by regulation and defined by whims. It's totally gone. And by the way, if you're going to exile someone, you need judicial oversight. Well, look, you can revoke someone's passport with no court supervision. Again, all through, just again, through administrating style, they sent letters out. Oh, okay, yeah, sure, we can take away your fundamental right. Amazing. Something they couldn't even do if they had a court hearing. They could do administratively. That's really the point. When we get this, birthright citizenship is nearly irrevocable. That's something. That doesn't seem like something the law wants to recognize there. And of course, obviously, if you do something fraudulent in your citizenship, then they could take that away in your application. So
what's interesting is that I just read that in the first 5 years of being naturalized as a U.S. citizen, it can be revoked if you join any particular type of organization, like the Communist Party or a terrorist organization or anything that happens to be like that. So you're actually on a probationary period.
Completely violates, right? It completely violates the law. I mean, this is why I'm saying the federal government is an open insurrection against the Constitution. And right in our citizenship, it's right under our noses. What is going on? It's right there. We go to here. Maxim 9, permanence of status. Citizenship should not be lightly revoked. DOJ saying we want to prioritize maximal denaturalization. I mean, and again, no punishment without law. Punishment requires a clear legal violation of the time. And in this case, there's no statute of limitations, right? So you could have retroactive punishment for something you didn't even know was there. There's a right to a fair hearing. We don't have fair hearings. The government won't allow that. The government won't allow fair hearings because the government doesn't win with fair hearings. And that's the last thing the government wants. We have an equality before the law. All citizens have equal rights. Well, that's not true. We know that. We know that because if you are dual citizenship by birth, you get preferred status. You are exempt from the exit tax. Isn't that nice? So we have, unequal treatment creates second-class citizens, everyone. And I mean, every American is a second-class citizen, at least, and probably worse than that. Citizens are entitled to government protection. In this case, the government's your enemy, right? Freedom of movement. And this is really where I would say, I'm not really a fan of dual citizens. I don't think it's actually, I think it's an oxymoron, but I do strongly believe in the travel freely. But here it is, the government's going to restrict that. They're administratively. And then if you want to renounce your citizenship, it requires a voluntary intent. But of course, the government could just sort of, whatever, they're making it up as they go. No citizen shall be made stateless. But the government can do this. Hey, you don't have a state, that's too bad, we'll deport you anyway. The law presumes loyalty. And in this case, it presumes disloyalty. Like foreign voting, which I actually think it does. I actually agree with that one. That's actually what I do. I don't think you can actually be a citizen in two different sovereign states. I'm going to disagree with a lot of people there, but I do believe people do have the right to freedom of movement. There's nothing to stop that. And again, citizenship by Hearst is inherent and inalienable, tied to natural law. And there might be some changes to that as well. State cannot arbitrarily revoke citizenship without just cause. There's a lot of discretion. And again, we really have a situation of find me the man and I'll find you the law he's violating. That's what we have. Punishment cannot apply to acts committed at the time. The law will allow denaturalization for past acts without time limits. Citizens have an inalienable right to reside in their country. Well, not in America. The burden of the proof is on the state, not in America, because they actually have that clear and convincing standard, right? We said maximum. Hey, if you're gonna deport someone, you got to give maximum. You got to take it seriously. It would be the highest standard beyond a reasonable doubt. But of course, the statute comes in and says, "Oh no, if the government just can only clear and convincing, whatever that means, we're not entirely sure." So this is a low proof. That is a violation of the law. And here we have citizens cannot be punished twice for the same act. This happens again and again, and often in the context of criminal proceedings. What the IRS does and what the courts do is they create two streams of collections, a restitution and the civil assessment. So what happens is people will wind up with two different streams. It punishes twice all the time. That's just one example of that. Maxim 24, the law favors family unity. That's not something that seems to be a priority at all of this government. Justice delayed is justice denied, right? Citizenship disputes must be resolved promptly to avoid harm. Well, under the U.S. Code, denaturalization proceedings can take years if delaying justice. I mean, just think about that. That's an incredible wondering if you're going to be deported or not. That's not a lot of fun, right? The law abhors statelessness. The state must avoid rendering citizens stateless, as nationality is a fundamental right. Is that something? Look, the U.S. Code doesn't care. The sovereign honors a mutual bond of allegiance with citizen. This is not even close. Presumption. We have there is a presumption of disloyalty. That's really what we have. The government's like, oh yeah, you're out to cheat us. We're going to punish you. You cannot revoke citizenship without a grave proven cause. Here we have broad grounds for revocation. Again, let's talk about what the U.S. tax code is. When you're going to do this, the U.S. tax code has 3.2 million words in it. But that's not the end of the story at all. That's actually just the beginning. Because from that, we get regulations. From the regulations, we get instructions. We get notices. We get websites. We get all of these things where it's actually, and by the way, Form 1040 instructions are written to the 11th grade level. The average reading comprehension of an adult in America is the 6th grade level. So there's something to think about. Did the person really know? How can anyone actually know what the law is in America? How do we find out what the law is? We don't know. It's impossible because there's too much. Citizens have a right to a recognized legal status in their state. Here you can lose your legal identity for naturalized citizens, so that it's like, hey, yeah, you have a fundamental right to be a state resident, right? Well, they're taking that away too. The the law protects the vulnerable here. The law is used against the vulnerable, right? That's who it's used against, particularly used against naturalized citizens. And due process is inviolable, which of course is violated all the time. We don't have a judicial process. The administrative actions, they could just make it up. There's really no meaningful review. The law favors certainty. Citizenship status should be certain and predictable. And the entire thing we're talking about today is like, okay, it's basically, okay, look, most people don't need to worry about that, which is true. Most people don't need to be worried about. Most naturalized citizens do not need to worry about being denaturalized for making a tax mistake. However, we're talking about it. The reason why we're talking about it is because things aren't certain and predictable. Another total violation by this government. Citizens must be informed of their actions threatening their status. Well, as it is right now, the IRS may take a few years to get back to you. And they may claim you made a mistake on something, and they may be totally wrong on that as well. So losing this over, the state power when the government can't even control the IRS. The government has no idea what the IRS is doing. They don't know. And so that's what we have. We have no guards against abuse. Citizens have a right to appeal decisions affecting their status. But, in true government fashion, they restrict your right of appeal with no right to counsel. Isn't that amazing? You're losing your fundamental right, a fundamental right to be in the council, but no right to counsel attaches. That's amazing stuff here. Citizenship should promote social and legal stability. I think we have exactly the opposite here. That's what we should have. Citizens cannot be punished for their status as citizens. Well, that's the entire U.S. tax code. We are all punished for being citizens. And here, in this case, targeting naturalized citizens, it's violating the Maxim's prohibition on status-based punishment by saying, let's go after those denaturalized ones. That's a violation there too. The law respects consent. Citizenship actions require the citizen's consent or intent. In this case, no, you don't need to consent to it. Even in cases now, if there was an extreme circumstance, they can deport you, but they don't need to prove that in any sort of way. All citizens are entitled to equal legal protections. All citizens, even naturalized ones. So we have unequal protections, and we have a tiered system of citizenship. We really do. With dual citizenship by birth being the highest level, then becoming just citizens, then naturalized citizens. I think that's really would be the where. Maxim 40, the law promotes justice. The law is creating injustice. The law is injustice. The law is walking, talking injustice. It can't not do injustice. It has to do injustice. That is what we have here. So that's kind of, I think this is, and now why I think this is so important, and really what I was getting to before is this analysis is something never done in law school. It's never done in law school to say, hey, look, take the law as it is right now, and let's see how it compares to the common law constitutional protections. It's never done. This is ignored. And I think this is one of the most important things I've done for myself as an attorney. And I'm like, I want to go through the entire U.S. code. I want to go through the entire U.S. code to say, how many times does it violate the Constitution? And what would that number be? I mean, if I actually went through this, what would that number be? And I would say, well, how many maxims are there? And I would say every single maxim out there is violated by the U.S. violated by U.S. code. I think that's what we would determine. And so this is really the point that we're going to is like, how are we ever gonna get justice here when the fundamental fight is wrong? If our fight in federal courts is over whether, hey, you guys got to follow these statutes and you're not doing them right, we already lost. The fight needs to be, we need real due process. And these courts aren't actually competent to hear these because they're making up stuff. They're in clear, open violation of these maxims of common law. The question is, what do we do about it? Now, I think this is the problem, and this is, I think, the solution. The problem we have is too few people know about this. The problem we have is too few people know that the U.S. federal government is acting unconstitutionally. That's the problem. They think the federal government can define what is constitutional. That's what they think. That's the problem. So John and I were talking about this last week, and I was mentioning this, that I might have a sponsor, but I'm not sure if that's necessary, because where I'm seeing this going, and what I want to do is I want to start my own law school, because there is so much unbelievable ignorance by the legal profession. The legal profession is the last place you would want to go to get an opinion on what the actual law is. We are taught to worship statutes. And what are statutes but nothing but the exercised political whim of usually the worst people on earth, right? That's what it is. Statutes are designed to overrule the common law. Now, statutes can, where the common law doesn't say anything, statutes are fine. But these statutes are specifically designed to violate the common law. That's why they are passed, and attorneys are not trained in any way to go through to say, this is a problem, this is an actual problem. This is an actual massive problem that we have. This is so now. I was thinking about starting my law school. So here's the news. I think I'm going to do it, because here's the issue that I have: is how do I get to the accreditation without that large sponsor that would need? Well, I think I'm going to start in Vermont, guys, because I can do this, because I can start my law school, because I'm a Vermont licensed attorney. As such, my students can clerk for me for 4 years and then sit for the Vermont bar. So I think I'm going to go that way. I think I am going to open up my own law school to educate real attorneys, people who want to be real attorneys, not statute, whatever statute hunt, whatever, these little, politic hunters and their statutes. If you want to be that, no, if you want to really understand the law, that is my call to action. Let's start a law school together. Let's really educate people on what the law should be. Let's educate people on what this federal government actually is. It is so divorced. It's the worst thing encountered. I mean, we're all sort of waiting for this thing like, oh man, imagine if we ruled. Imagine if we lived under the tyranny, how awful it would be. None of us would know what to do. We'd be living in constant fear and anxiety of this government. And that's exactly what we have. That is exactly what we have. So with that, now I'm going to turn over to Keith. Keith, I kind of had a little bit of a long rant there. Did I lose you at any point?
I was listening.
Okay. Do you understand that really what we have is all these laws passed overrule the common law, and that is unconstitutional. That is completely unconstitutional, and every single founder would have believed so. And it's really just more recent. There's additional theories that come up, and we're told about those in law school. We're told about positivism. We're told that our rights come from the government. Oh, we're told that. And we're told there's those naturalists who will go, they kind of sneer at the naturalists who believe that fundamental rights exist. Rather, what law school wants to convince you of is that our rights come from this awesome federal government that's responsible for so much of our joy. And without them, we'd be lost. That's really what it is. What law school doesn't want to teach you is how illegal the federal government is. That's what it doesn't want to teach you. Is it because law schools get a lot of federal aid? Maybe, I don't know. But I'm going to tell you, the law school does not want to teach people the actual constitutional law. They want to give a version of it that is profitable for them, but not anything that's legal, not at all. The problem we have is the federal government is currently, in the position where it claims it decides everything. But as we know, all power resides in the people. And when the people figure that out, this government has a huge, huge problem. And this government needs to and if you're in the government, you might want to just sort of maybe document that you weren't the biggest part of the problem. Because once the people find out the right of grand jury actually belongs to the people, that the people are grand juries. And if these, Donald Trump really should be heard by a grand jury, should be impaneled to consider Donald Trump, to indict him for violating the Constitution with what he's doing, completely violating it. And in fact, you can kind of think pretty much every politician is in open violation of our fundamental rights because they refuse to respect us. They insist that we work for them and not the other way around. All right. right. So, all right. So now with that, so that's, let's see what we got for some comments here. And I did see some great comments. Let's see here. So, all right. Hey, Andrew. Yeah. Thank you. Andrew is my common law, I think he's my common law sponsor. He's been watching this channel. I really appreciate Andrew. He's really been making me think. And yeah, who issues my license, Andrew? Yeah, the state of Connecticut issues my license, and also state of Vermont. Those are those who issue my license. But I kind of have problems with that too. I do kind of have problems because who are they to decide? You know, because they'll create these requirements, and of course, these are all people who know far less than I do. You know, these are all, you know, all these people on these bar examination committees, they've worked on bar, you know, they don't know the actual, they don't deal with clients. And so it's always fun when you're overruled by people who know far less than you do. That's a lot of fun. So that is something that is really disgusting. I think that the states define these things, and they're taking away powers because really, I really would want to look into that. And that's really one of the reasons why I want to start my own law school, is because we can fundamentally change the nature of things when there's multiple people who know the law. Look, if we had 2,000 people if we had 2,000 lawyers in this country who actually knew the law, that's probably all we need. It's probably all we need to reclaim it. We don't need that many because so many people aren't interested in this. They just go by it, right? Keith did tell me he had to hop off. So thanks so much for joining us, Keith. We did go over this. Let's see what we got. We got a lot of comments. Rob, thank you so much. Let's see, with Borchell, good morning to you. U.S. government have that my mother-in-law passive aggressive energy. Oh yeah, right. Yeah, the France government is more like a stepmother. Oh, all right. Yeah. So Borchell saying, yeah, the U.S. government is that mother-in-law who's passive aggressive. Yeah, and France is like maybe a benign stepmother. Interesting. Yeah. Unfortunately, Keith had to step off. I wish I had that earlier, so that'd be fun. Yeah, it'd be interesting. But I think you're right on that. That we do have we really do have a government that's passive aggressive. It tells us one thing, does another. It says they're our best friend, while it hammers us again and again. And what I think needs to stop is we have to stop believing it. Like, no, they're not on our side. What they say and what they do are two different things. What they say sounds good. What they do is never good. And that's what we have. Let's see here what we got here. Okay. Here you go, John. Here's something off topic. Thank you, Software. Thanks for joining us today. Could you guys do a show on FACA and what info is shared and how it started? Yeah, this might be a good one to do because there are some updates to this. There are some updates to how that FACA data is processed. So that might be a good idea for future software. I appreciate that. Yeah. Maybe we'll look into that, see any updates on how it's going. Currently, the IRS is getting the information on FACA, and I haven't heard an update. But a previous commissioner says we have all the data, but it's in a non-standard format. And we're not sure what we're going to do with that. And when I heard that, I said, well, that's a perfect application of AI to make sense of their nonsense data and give them something usable. I'm not sure what's going on right now. And I also can tell you certain things aren't shared via FACA, like Australian superannuations are not shared via FACA, but that'd be a good idea. We could maybe do a FACA update. Thanks so much for joining us today, by the way. Yeah, and how it actually works, because I think that's a lot of fear. You know, a lot of people are like, okay, what's going to happen? And then what happens if the federal government does find out about it and you're not filed? Then what happens there, right? So that would be a good one. That would be a good one to get here. Connecticut's not that horrible. It's just our legal system. It's a beautiful state. I mean, we're filled with genius. I mean, there's great people here all around. It's just the government that's awful. And that's where I think if we had real lawyers, I think we can get this. I mean, Connecticut's got so many drastic problems. And again, another state that doesn't like to follow due process. I am suing. I am working on a complaint right now against the Connecticut Department of Revenue Services, because what the Connecticut Department of Revenue Services does is very much like the federal government, but actually worse. If the Connecticut Department of Revenue Services wants to assess a tax debt against you, they could do it totally by mail, without without the court intervening whatsoever. They could take your house without a court order. They could take it all by sending you mail. There's no independent right to be heard. There's no independent tribunal. There's no actual meaningful notice as well. and there's no independent opportunity to be heard. So Connecticut, it's really the government is really, really terrible. And I have a friend who is in the Senate, and he tells me that it is in one of the most dysfunctional places in the world, as you could imagine, and that so many of the people have no idea what they're doing. They're not even there. It is really like we really are overruled by our worst people. And then I also did have I might have mentioned this before, but I did have a client who was this Connecticut legislature. He quit when he got into recovery, and he explained to me that he goes, "Oh no, if look, I was an alcoholic and drug abuser as a Connecticut legislator, and it fit my lifestyle perfectly. It fit my lifestyle perfectly." He goes, basically, I would get to the legislative office building at 11 o'clock in the morning, start drinking, have lunch, meet with a couple of people in the afternoon. About 3, 4, we'd really start drinking. And then around 6 o'clock, we'd go over to the Capitol Grill. The lobbyists would come over, make sure I have all the drinks I need. Then the lobbyists I really liked would come over with bags of cocaine. I'd go do serious lines of blow, drinking incredible amounts. I'd be so hammered by 2 o'clock in the morning, I could barely walk. The Capitol Police would then drive me home so that I wouldn't get a DUI. And then I would, just pass out. Then at 11 o'clock, the Capitol Police would be at my door to bring me back to work. And he goes, I quit that. He goes, I was not the only one. And that is what we're dealing with. That is actually what we're dealing with our legislative process. So when people think that voting is a solution, no, the rule of law is a solution. The way the rule of law is, people will assemble and take back the law. John, what do you think about this? What do you think about the common law here? What do you think about it? Do you think that'd be a good idea to have a law school that would teach people the common law?
Yeah, I do. And I wouldn't worry about the accreditation at all. I mean, I would just simply establish the law school. I mean, it seems to me, on a broader level, the debate here really comes down to the same things that people have argued about for centuries. That is, is there such a thing as individual rights? Are there things that are off limits, when it comes to government? And, while you were talking, I thought I remembered that the Massachusetts Constitution had a provision in it specifically incorporating the British common law. I couldn't find it. There's somewhere.
And it was, and I know Andrew's passing this around. Andrew could probably chime in which ones, which some do have it, some specifically.
Well, it seems, yeah, I mean, the question is whether they specifically incorporate the common law of Britain or not. I think it's likely that some do. I mean, obviously, I think that's important, okay? But the issue is not, I mean, you can frame the issue in terms of the common law, right? But the real issue, I think, is should the legal system, I think, what's the role of the Constitution, and should constitutions be understood to be the will of the people, and B, provide protections from government for those people? And that's always been my understanding of what a constitution is in large part. I mean, sure, they allocate, there's division of powers, and this sort of stuff, but really, I think that's what they're about. And one of the things about the U.S. Constitution, it's an old Constitution, right, is that, I don't think under any interpretation could it be construed to be a rights-friendly document, making it, somewhat different, I think, from more modern constitutions. But yes, I do think that this is a good idea. I think you should set it up. It sounds to me as though it's more of a understanding the origins of law and what a constitution should do, and recognizing the presumption of the legitimacy of basic rights in certain areas, where the government can't get involved in this. I mean, my view of government, even benign governments, is that they really exist to oppress citizens.
Yeah. Exactly.
In some form or another. And, so people will say, well, that's fine, but, that's why we have democracies, and, they equate the idea of a democracy with human freedom or something, which is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, all democracies do is they're just a reflection of, how the coercive power of government is exercised. So yeah, I mean, I think this is a good idea, and I think it's a hard job, because what you're really asking people to do, is go back through history, right, and understand the evolution of the concept of human rights. Going back to things like the Magna Carta, and maybe.
Well, see, that's. I think that's why I get hope, though, because one of the fundamental truths I've discovered as a lawyer is how lazy most people are. How lazy.
Well,
it's like the work I find that's bad. It's like, yeah, they were lazy. They didn't want to do the right job. They weren't thorough. They didn't do right. And so there's a laziness. And that's why I say, well, we could use that to our advantage, because as soon as you start talking about things that people don't understand, they go away. They don't want to sound stupid. So essentially you can just own the floor by talking about the truth. And when there's a group of people who are talking about the truth, that's going to end up being the core. So I actually think the fact is that not everybody is interested in this, and very few people are, in fact.
Well, most are not interested in it, but I mean, that's true of anything. Okay.
So I think the point, and I think
I think this is a good idea.
Well, and I think that's the point. Because look, a lot of times on the show, we're like, oh man, this is awful. What are we going to do? And we're just like, I feel like awful because I'm just like revving people up. I'm agitating without a source of call to action. Although like, I don't know here, guys. I don't know what we have here. But I think there is really a call to action for at least some people here. It's like, let's go to the fundamental rules. And if we really explain, and this is what I've said before, that and what I've learned in the tax system is Americans will follow any law, no matter how stupid it is. Mm-hmm. So Americans are some of the most law-abiding people on the planet, and I will probably only give the advantage to Germans. Germans are rule followers every which way. Americans love compliance, and as you said before, John, Americans it's like their thing. And I would say the compliance is because Americans are rule followers for the large part.
Oh, they are probably the number one rule followers in the world.
No matter where, if it tells you to go off a cliff, the rule says to go off a cliff. Oh, okay, I better do that, right?
Well, the problem is largely this, right? That you talk about people being lazy. Well, lazy people don't like nuance. Okay, they don't. They don't like trying to interpret things in context and that. And
lazy
also,
people like black and white. Yeah.
I mean, there's it's just the culture, right? Different cultures in the world, and there's no question that I mean, it's almost as though it's almost maybe this is true. I mean, maybe America was largely founded. Maybe the independence movement in America was, probably to minimize or get rid of what they regarded as arbitrary British law. I don't know, but it is a problem. Yeah. Okay.
Well, I would say, here's a comment from Lee. Thanks so much for joining us today. Basically, her point is that, what the federal government is getting close to the rule of Franco and Pinochet, or Donald Trump probably. And I would say, that's really, I think you're right here. And this is the dynamic that I see as when the people are denied their fundamental rights and are abused, they run to that strong man. Mussolini was popular. He was not unpopular. He was very popular. Hitler was not unpopular. He was very popular. These strong men are very, very popular. So a great way to maximize your chances of getting a strong man in is to deny people their fundamental rights. Now, of course, the strong man may not be the solution.
I think you're really, really onto something there. I mean, I have, I've thought over the years, a lot about, how the political situation in the United States has evolved. And one of the, so President Trump, winning the election in 2016, was really, really interesting. And I think it was just being in the right place at the right time, and a lot of things fell into place for him. The first thing was this: that in the primary, I mean, I think he was the only non-government person, right? So it was very easy to frame that as, I mean, really now, do you want to nominate one more person whose career has been in government, et cetera. So, he was able to divide and conquer the whole group, right? Basically by saying it's me, the independent, versus, okay, all these people who've been in government. And then they sort of, because there were so many of them, he was able to get that. But then, we get into the whole, the election itself. And I think a very large part of his success was his openly ridiculing the Democrats and Hillary Clinton, because, certainly this has always been true, but I think it was particularly clear by 2016 that the Democratic Party was in general clearly indifferent to, individual Americans. And I think a lot of people felt powerless against the indifference of the Democratic Party. So Trump comes along and, defines them as the enemy, ridicules them, right? And says, I'm on your side, right? I'm on your side. I recognize how abusive and revolting these people are. And, that gave him a huge push, right? And that's sort of consistent with your, the way you phrase as a strong man. I mean, I think that, a strong man in politics is somebody who says, well, I recognize, how much you've been abused and oppressed by the government, and I'm strong enough to end that now. You were going to take back, we're going to recognize, you as sort of a valued human being. Now, and this is why largely, leaving aside your opinion of the Republicans and Trump, I mean, what I don't like is the lack of due process, primarily this sort of stuff. But I see no change in America until the Democratic Party dissolves.
Oh, I would say, I mean, I'm not even sure exactly what to make of the politics. Again, I'm starting to think this is all staged, and that Donald Trump's push, there was actually some things about it that weren't organic, that there were some strange things going on and some strange pushes back in 2016. I do kind of, so I'm not entirely sure exactly what's going on, but that the problem is that when you become more concerned with the strongman and not your own individual rights,
well,
concern
look,
yourself.
Anthony, if we're dealing with a country that fundamentally worships law, right? To worship law is to oppose individual rights, because the whole purpose of law, right, is to override individual rights.
Well, it's confusing. The purpose of statute is to the purpose of statute is, statutes are considered law, so that's why we're getting a little confusing. But the law is the common law. Statutes have overridden it, and it's just, again, it's just creating so much
the activity, the legislative,
the destabilization. And I would say statutes create so much. They destabilize a country. They take away certainty, and they all put us on edge. And then just begging for the person to call, to just like, yes, you're on our side. And of course, you give us something, a little tiny thing, but meanwhile, the lack of due process, the whole federal machine is keep churning away. And then, there's a lot of people think, oh, the solution will be to vote the Democrats in next time. And there we go. And it's just get back and
that's not going to happen. Let me ask you a question.
Yep.
And try to answer as simply as you can. What percentage of the life of an American is devoted to compliance with law and regulations in their daily life? What do you think?
Sorry, what was that again, John?
What percentage of the life of an American resident is devoted very purposefully and specifically to compliance with laws and regulations?
Well, it's going to depend a lot, but I guess average. And what should you do, and what do people do?
Well, no, forget what they should or should not do. I mean, my point is simply this, that there's so much that people have to comply with.
Yeah.
I mean, even if you just look at the tax return thing, right?
Yeah.
How much time that takes. I mean, what's happened is that this has evolved into such an oppressive force that, I mean, we can quibble about exactly how far it goes, but nobody would deny that a very significant part of the lives of residents of first world democracies, I mean, we're talking about the United States, but this would be true in Canada as well, just goes to complying with, laws, regulations, whatever. You live in Toronto, all of a sudden you get a letter saying they have a vacant home tax, okay, saying, hey, whoa, fill this out, tell us who lives in your house. This is incredible stuff. It really is. I mean, this is not what governments were originally intended to be.
Right, when I would say the Constitution protects the government, that's what it is. That the Constitution is there to protect the government from the people.
Well, the Constitution, yeah. So I don't know. Maybe. I think that's how it may work in practice. But we're not exactly living in an era where the rights and dignity of the individual are getting any respect.
No.
Okay, there's no question about that. And I think that, I think it would be a good idea to reverse course on that and remind these governments, okay, that, if we go back to earlier language, that they exist only with the consent of the people, et cetera.
Yeah. Borchell, and I think, schools that have an honest intent of offering education truly do not care for accreditation. You know what? And so, yeah, Borchell's agreeing with you. So, all right. And I'm all right. You know what? And honestly, because in my own vision, that people, all I need to do is get 2,000 people educated pro se, just to handle their own things is all we need.
I think, Anthony, yeah, I think that's true. But I don't think the point here is getting a bunch of, licensed lawyers. I think the point is to get people thinking about what a constitutional legal system should be and what are the historical origins. I mean, I think it's a wonderful idea. And I think that, Anthony, perhaps this is, your mission. Like, this is why you were placed on the earth. And
I don't know, maybe.
I think maybe it was. And I'm all for, I'd like to call it, and let's establish it right now on IRSMedic, okay?
We'll do it right now. Well, the name. I don't have the name for it.
The Anthony Parent School of Law.
Really? Really? Wow. All right.
Well, I mean,
you're right. I guess it would make sense.
Of course it would make sense. But I mean, you can call it anything you want. But the point is that I've heard you talk about this. We've chatted about this a few times. I think the point is that this is an educational and consciousness raising mission. The simple mission is that people matter. Individual rights matter. Governments are presumptively oppressive. And the reason for a constitution is to protect people from the oppressiveness of government to a reasonable extent. In other words, there are limitations on what governments can do. Okay? And that is, I think generally what is lacking. And, this is a movement. You can call it a law school if you want, but it's a movement. All right. And it has to start somewhere and it can grow. And, I think, Anthony, that I don't think you're the only person in the world who could do this, but you're one of the few people who could do it and is willing to do it. And therefore, what was that movie? Dead Poets Society. Anthony, seize the day.
We were going to do it. All right, we're going to do that. So, hey, I want to thank everyone for joining us. We did go over time. I think we had a big audience today. Really, for some new people, we want to thank everyone so much for joining us today. Great topic, really. And I mean, this show, and I really want to thank everyone who showed up, because this show is really making me a better attorney, a real attorney, which is making me a better human being. Really, truly. And it's through this podcast has allowed me to through the realm of taxation and citizenship, through this is the way in that I found the tyranny and my purpose in life. Truly amazing how it all does work out. So I do want now. Look, this is something that, we can't do alone. You notice how I just used the we. I just brought you into this, everyone into this. This is something we can't do alone. We can't educate people alone. And in my idea to really get this off, to get this off is creating a membership site essentially. And so just I do have a busy day. So if people are willing to help on this project, I'm going to share my email with you right away, right now. Reach out to me at aparent@irsmedic.com if you want to get in on this law school project that we have to truly educate. Reach out to me there. Hopefully, get some people. I know some people on this would be interested in there. Hopefully, get some more. And there is a group. It does seem like there's a good group, a common law group on Twitter that I've been sort of becoming friends with too. And I'm really seeing, a really wonderful inventory of trainings that are happening, and there's some great stuff out there already. What is his name? Jared does the common law maxims. Every day he has one up that are really, really good. I just have a feed of those and do that and really start a true education of Americans. And because I think once Americans know what the real law is, they can't help but follow it. And if Americans follow the real law, Washington, D.C. would wish for pitchforks. It would wish for torches. That would be their best outcome. Once Americans actually understand what the law is, it's the end of this tyranny. It's all over. It's game over. And that's what we can get to. And we can get there without any violence. I'm not looking to get there any violence, not do that. Not looking to lead an army. Fighting is really nasty work. I don't even like camping all that much. I'm not really going to get out there in the field and do any of that. Really, we don't need to. We have a rule of law, and all we need to do is inform people what it is. We don't need violence. It's just informing the people what the law actually is. Americans are good people. Once they know the law, they're going to follow it, and that's really going to be the mission. So there's my contact information. I do want to, Keith did have to drop off early. But if you are, we do have a lot of people wondering what to do about their overseas, they're not in compliance. If it's something you're thinking about doing, if you want to get in compliance with this great, great government of ours, you can reach out to Keith, and you don't want to reach out to a tax professional, reach out to him. Just explain what's going on, and I think this is a way might not have a tax problem, you have a compliance problem. Who said that? Was that you, John, or is that Keith? That's you. That's another John Richardson's quote. You have a compliance problem, not so. And if you don't want to reach out to me or John yet, you can reach out to Keith. He has the nice bedside manner there. So there's his contact information there. Also go to his group on Facebook. If you're on Facebook, he has a great group. I think near 12,000, might have just gone over that. And here's his email if you want to just email him directly with your concerns, what's going on, US_overseas_advocate@outlook.com. Which brings me to the great John Richardson. The great John Richardson up in Toronto with his 32-ounce McMick Cafe coffee. He is powered up, ready to take you. John really helps Americans with difficult expatriations, and he is a few steps ahead of the government. So if you are renouncing, you're thinking of renouncing, you're on the fence, John's going to be a really good guy to reach out to who will give you the truth. Very fair. We're very fair all around. Here's his email, citizenshipsolutions@protonmail.com. And likewise, I am actually a tax attorney. I run a firm. We actually do kind of everything here. While I am working to eliminate the IRS from our daily lives and the federal government's abuses, we do still recognize a practical need to be in compliance because I don't want to be the guy not in compliance. I don't want to be the target myself. I'm in compliance myself, which I'm not a huge fan of, but I do it anyway. And if you're in the same boat and you want to be in compliance, but you want to be in compliance with a firm that doesn't see the government as a good thing, but knows how to avoid the problems and is actually a firm the government might take a little more seriously, you can reach out to us at IRSMedic.com. We handle a lot of difficult issues, crypto audits, offshore disclosures. Our clients are generally entrepreneurs around the globe, sometimes right down the street in Connecticut too. And we help out there. And right now too, our clients are kind of all getting a little older. So we're getting into more estate planning issues going on too. So if that's something, if you're international estate planning, there's not a lot of attorneys who can handle international estate planning. So that's something that we help out. You can reach out to me as well. There's my email. Go to irsmedic.com. So I think that's what we have for today, John. I think that's what we have. Do you want to do the FACA update for next week, or do you You want to go? I think that'd be a good one.
We can do that. I mean, we have that. We could combine into that the recent decision in the Netherlands that came down last week.
All right, yeah, let's do that. Yeah, right. We'll have the Netherlands decision, and then we'll go over kind of a FATCA update would be great for next week, and maybe we'll sprinkle some promotions in for our law schools. Hopefully, I get some progress.
Well, Anthony, I just want to make a very, very strong point here, right? You keep, you're talking about this accreditation stuff. All an accreditation is you just giving somebody the ability to regulate you and complain about you, right? So, I mean, I don't understand why you would have any interest at all in accreditation.
Well, because I can do it. I mean, I think, I guess, I'm also doing it for my employees, because I have a few employees who want to become lawyers. So I was like, okay, well, hey, this is what I'll do. I'll set up the law school. We're not going to have accreditation, but you could become a lawyer through the clerkship. Vermont. I think there's another state. I don't think it's California, but there's another state that has a clerkship program.
I think New York may still have one.
Somebody does, but it's one of the few where you don't need to go to law school.
I know. Yeah, there are a few states.
So I'm like, well, if I'm going to do it, yeah.
Okay. I wouldn't get too much involved here, okay? In terms of this, the thing to do is avoid the accreditation for a very, very simple reason, okay? You don't want to, get into a club where you're agreeing that they can regulate you, okay? You don't want that, just leave it at that, okay? I mean,
fair enough.
See what he says. Professionals criticizing shows intelligence and care should be a norm, but we don't live quite normal times, and that a big surprise. Well, so maybe next week can announce the rollout of the law school.
All right.
I mean, actually, why don't we just agree that as of this moment, it is created, it exists,
it has been done,
it exists.
We just had our first official meeting. Our executive meeting just concluded. We voted to approve the law school.
No, we did. We just brought the law school into existence. Let's not complicate this.
Oh, all right. So we brought it now exists. The Anthony E. Parent School.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's a wonderful idea.
All right. I want to thank everyone. This is a wonderful community that we have, and I mean the amount of intelligence that comes here is incredible. And I think we just have wonderful people, and that you really do inspire me to do this. If you're wondering if you have an impact, you absolutely do. Absolutely do. When I see the people engaging with us live, in the comments I see, you are absolutely motivating me to do this, and I really appreciate it, because it is making me a better person. We're having a lot of fun too, and we're having a lot of fun, and it brings me into contact with people like John Richardson. Really, fantastic human being who's not afraid to get to go deeper into the analysis. So, really wonderful. Everyone, thanks so much for joining. Join us on X. You can find us on X. Again, let me just get my my X at. You can find me on X if you want to comment there. There's usually that's usually where the robust discussions happen. I'm not commenting so much on YouTube comments here, but usually on X, it's just a little easier there. It's sort of more of a discussion platform. I go there too. And John also is on X as well, at Expatriation Law, and Keith. We're all on there, so you can find us there. So if you are looking to interface with us, that's probably your best bet, unless you want to just email me directly or John. All right. With that, this is Anthony Parent of the Anthony E. Parent School of Law, signing off. John Richardson and Keith Redmond, thanks so much for watching.